Just fucking do it. Subscribe now. It would be disingenuous to say I get these daily, but I get several during the week. Not unlike Gabriel, who never came to the seminar, blah, 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 and did great. There are, I don't know how many, but this is a kid. I've been studying your content on YouTube for years. That's bad. But after watching for so long, I finally pulled my finger out of my ass and took action. The tragedy is most don't take action. They continue to watch me, and they know everything about me. And I announced about a year and a half ago, the only thing that you don't know about me is what hand I used to wipe my ass. And I announced it about 24 months ago. It was my right hand. So that's all the information about me is on YouTube now. Okay. I just acquired a 7-figure business with no money down. After working for 7 years on another business, I started and only achieving multiple 6 figures per year. I have finally broken into millions. Thank you. I just wanted to send this email to thank the class. And this is an Irish boy from Dublin. Okay? So he really had to pull the finger out of his ass. But there are, I don't know about, arguably millions. We know we've created at least 1 million millionaires. We know that. That's not any big deal. When I set that goal back in the early 90s, $1 million was more money than it is today. So it doesn't really mean shit now. Well, I won't say it doesn't mean shit. This is an exaggeration, but if you're living homeless and now you got $1 million, that's means shit. I was hoping it would snow last night, but it didn't. It's just cold. This is how the weather used to be when I first moved here almost 40 years ago, except it would be snowing. And you'd have trouble getting, because they didn't have Amazon and that kind of stuff then, you'd have big trouble, your employees getting to work. We used to have a girl who's now married with kids that lived just at the end, across the field there. And she used to, with snowshoes, come to work. But now, I'm not so sure that if a kid lived about, I don't know, 500 or 600 meters, they would come to work because the work ethic has changed dramatically. Or I should say the lack thereof. Today we're going to go through a bunch of your cases, and we're going to, and if you've already noticed, the kids, when you get up to present, notwithstanding you've been with your group to go through the nuances of your deal, the big group, the total class, often has a different point of view. And that's what a B school is supposed to be able to do, except it takes 2 years. We do it in 8 or 9 days. Because there's always a different point of view. There's always a different way to do the deal. Not all of those different ways are better, but in some cases, which we've already found out in 3 or 4 cases, a certain aspect of the deal is more important. One, it can be absorbed into the rest of your businesses. Other things that you have can be bolted on. Some fall in love with the cash in the deal. That's there. That you can suck out, arguably. But there's always a different way to look at these things. Now, I would be disingenuous if I didn't tell you when I first started doing this, I didn't look at all those nuances. It was just like I tell you, there's only one thing in this model that's really noteworthy is the motivated seller. When I looked at the transactions decades ago, it really transcended the motivated seller. It was putting numbers up. I've always been numbers oriented. You've heard me say that if I had any athletic ability, which I don't, but if I was going to play baseball, I'd go to Ted Williams, the former, I think it was Red Sox player, who was the only player to finish, the last player to finish with a batting average over 400. I wouldn't talk to anybody else. And so I always wanted to put up numbers. And then in hindsight, in retrospect, I went back to see how much the EBITDA was. But I always knew that the free cash flow had to cover debt service. And so then retrospectively, we went back and I figured out just how good I was. And that's that $1 trillion number that I thought I would do in 5, 7, 8. If everything went wrong, 10 years, took me 24 years, 23 and a half years. And you've heard me say this countless times because I grossly underestimated the lack of self-esteem on the planet, not just the people that come here. And so the numbers, after 15, 18, 20 years, started to accumulate. And then, of course, NEOM, 500 billion, and now 2.29, call it 2.3 trillion. And we've got guys like TK, 348 million. And we've got a bunch of guys and gals that have made the numbers look not bigger than they are, but look grandiose, but it's taken a long time. And the one thing you don't have is time. A couple of you in the room, namely one in the room, has got less time than the rest. But this is not, and I told you, I think the first day, one of the reasons that we disbanded the one-year mentor program is because after 3 or 4 years of it, I looked back and said the average person, man or woman or it, was taking the 11.2 months to do a deal. Coincidentally, the program ended in 12 months. And so then when we brought it down to 9 months, they were doing it in 8 months. And when we brought it down to 6 months, they were doing it in 5 months, and so on and so forth. And then ultimately we did away with it. And then somebody like the pig fucker did it in 26 days. So if I had squeezed, I don't like to say, but I didn't in the beginning, I'm sure the numbers would have been a lot greater, and we'd have a lot more, millionaires and billionaires, et cetera, because they would have been pressed into action. Now, for those of you that might be able to relate to this, normally, hopefully they don't put you out on the curb to sleep, but I'm sure at least one of you in this room has slept on the couch. Maybe you didn't have 2 bedrooms, so you couldn't sleep in the spare bedroom, but you slept on the couch. And and I'm sure this guy's embarrassed. The neighbors are watching, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But all the arguments that you're going to have, all the discussions you're going to have, mainly with the board, you can win by sheer force, because you have more than 50% of the deal. But all of them, you don't necessarily want to win, because that's why you got them there. And we've had people with my kind of personality, don't confuse me with the facts, I may be wrong, but I'm never in doubt, blah, 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 that lose their boards. And some of you in this room have fired board members. A couple of you in the room have lost board members because, for whatever reason. Normally, it's because they either get greedy and want more than you had offered them. And up until the first board meeting, when you form the board and actually issue the shares, there's really no downside other than it's a pain in the butt to have to go get another board member. And as Gabriel, had his first board, unofficial board meeting without his chairman. And then when he got his chairman, and as he noted in his clip yesterday, he gained stature. He didn't use that word, but he gained stature with the board because the board knew he was for real. Now, the flip side of that, which didn't happen to him, is that everybody leaves. They know the model, and they pull themselves together. They pull their collective thumbs out of their ass, and you've got a competitor. And that's happened too. And I said the first or second day, when one of you was walking down Piccadilly in London, and he saw his chairman, his CEO, and his CFO in the fucking Starbucks, that doesn't send a red flag. I'm not sure what kind of flag that sends, but especially since he didn't know about it, blah, blah, blah. He lives in London, and these 3 guys don't live in London. I didn't add that yesterday or the day before. It's not a coincidence that they were walking down shopping, but he didn't take the right action. He continued to walk down Piccadilly, and the deal disintegrated. I've told you about another similar instance where the guy now is selling Madras shirts in Tallahassee, Florida. He's the manager of a shirt department in some department store. This is a bit of an exaggeration, almost greatness. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with working in a retail store. But from almost greatness to selling fucking Madra shirts in Tallahassee, Florida, in the Panhandle shirt shop is more or less from the penthouse to the shithouse. And let's just say he makes 30 grand or 40 grand, and maybe he's going to get a $1,500 bonus for Christmas, and that's his life. That's his life. So whether this guy stood up to his wife, he says he won the argument, or not, he's still sleeping on the fucking curb. Okay, so you can read that a bunch of ways, but I never slept on the couch. And there are going to be tough decisions that you're going to have to make. Well, you don't have to do anything, but if you follow the model, there are going to be extremely tough decisions. Gabriel has already made a lot of tough decisions. His board has changed. The CFO is gone, amongst other things. It's often missed or glossed over. 25 board positions changed under Josh Kim's leadership. 25 board positions changed in the first 38 months, if I remember correctly, a little over 3 years. So that means he didn't hire, but he brought on board and exited them 25 guys, a couple gals. That's the highest that I'm aware of, that I've been able to keep track of. And he writes about it on YouTube, I believe, or talks about it on his Twitter or whatever. That is extremely disruptive. Just imagine if he hadn't gone through 25 people, how successful he could have been. Because now they've got to go through the learning process. They have to, I don't like to use the word bond, but the board members, guys and gals, have to, like dogs sniffing each other when they first meet. And yet he was still able to do a lot of stuff. But 25. 3 chairmen, 3 CEOs, 3 CFOs, and then I forget how the breakdown was. But just think about it. Now, you've gone through a little bit of that, and a few of others in the room have gone through a little bit of that. But 25. I mean, and that's why Josh has 87% I think, because in his particular case, many of the people that didn't walk away from the equity, he bought out on pennies on the dollar. And so he has a great deal more than normal. And during Corona period, about 2.5 years, our average, the U in the deal, has 67%. The average of all the guys that I have the data on. But that's about the same. Before Corona, it was about 62%. So it's roughly 2/3. And that gives you room to grow before you take equity from someplace else and you and everybody else is diluted. That gives you a lot of room to grow. The difference between 65% and 51%, that's a lot of room for dilution. I don't spend a lot of time on it, but it's obvious. You go as long as you can, as hard as you can, as fast as you can, without taking equity. Because at some juncture, you're going to drop below 50%. And that's normally, if there is a anti-secret sauce, it's dropping below 50%. Because as successful as a couple of you have been in doing deals, when you drop below 50%, the true jealousy, the true animosity, and in some cases, the true hatred surfaces. It just does. And for people like Mr. Zuckerberg, who set it up following what I call the Ford formula, that old man Ford did at Ford Motor Company decades ago, he's still in the saddle because he can't be gotten rid of. And at least for the last 5 years, there's a faction of people that write about. He's stayed past the point of not no return, but past the point that he should have been in a regular company where he didn't control everything. He would have been gone a long, long time ago. Now, that's one of your big fears. And a real company, and I say real, not meaning that yours companies aren't real, but in the real world, several of you in this room had already been thrown out. Maybe all of you, including you. And that's why you're afraid. You're afraid of being put out. You win the battle and you're sleeping on the curb. And that's your, innate fear. One of the great comments that the Viking Bitches Chairman General says when she used the word fear, she said, we don't use the word fear. We're concerned. We're not afraid. And because fear, false expectations appearing real. But that's what keeps you, instead of running towards a gunfire at full speed, you're running towards a gunfire at half speed or a quarter speed or 4/5 speed. And as the slave told Caesar as he's coming into the Colosseum, glory is fleeting, master. Glory is fleeting. And all that stuff that you've heard about, and the debacles, and more recently the crypto fuck up, all that is registered someplace in your subconscious, and in some cases in your conscious mind. A couple of you have come up and told me about how dramatic affirmations, goals and affirmations have been in just a short period of time that you've been out in beyond the auspices of this little island. And it does. And last night when I was doing my affirmations and my prayers, I was thinking about, and a couple of people that were on my prayer list, I moved off because they're not dying now, or they're dead. And I put them in, I have another list for the dead people when I'm saying my prayers. But again, everything I read and hear, and normally the hours that I'm spending with you, I'm listening to BBC, Al Jazeera, the CNBC, CNN, so I can have as much knowledge as my brain can pack in, which it can pack in a lot. Any questions or comments of anything so far? Last night you saw whom? J.P. Morgan. And one of the things that he was, you remember the list of people I said, what obsessed him? Hitler with his baby genitals, blah, blah, blah. Well, J.P. Morgan had a nose like this. And I forget what it's called. Part of the reason, theoretically, his nose was like this is because he used to snort whiskey through his nostrils. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's, the saying. It's also he's the only bank that really still has its name, J.P. Morgan. He was, he didn't want people taking pictures of him. When the famous painting that hangs in J.P. Morgan's offices is not a true likeness of him in his face. It's a reasonable facsimile because he didn't want for 100 years. Now, I'm exaggerating, but I mean, he had a very, one would argue, ugly facial attachment that he breathed through. But he was obsessed about that. And this was before they had just started plastic surgery. But the results of the plastic surgery 100 years ago, or 120 years ago, weren't too good. So it was kind of hit or miss. So what are the comments, the takeaways from J.P. Morgan, if any?
I have one. Morgan, in his battle allied with Edison against Tesla and Westinghouse, used the threat of litigation against Westinghouse and basically said, I'm going to spend you, into the grave via litigation. So it was litigation as a business weapon, even though Westinghouse and Tesla probably owned the patent rights. He forced them back by saying that's spending.
Yeah, he forced them back to the table with litigation. Teddy Roosevelt, who was one of the guys that I had on the list, he was so successful or driven, obsessed, because his dad, one of the reasons his dad had bought his way out of the Civil War, okay? And he was embarrassed about that. So he believed he should go out and do acts of bravery. Well, he was one of the first presidents that used not the bully pulpit, but the court system to go after the big magnates, Rockefeller and et al. And now it's common use. Litigation is a business tool. And in your on my website, in fact, not on the gigs that you got, there's the 26 or 28 rules. I think I updated it recently to 28 rules of litigation. That if you're not willing to litigate or threatening to litigate, litigation is ugly no matter how you do it. Okay, but you're going to wind up on the shit end of the stick. My management style and Teddy Roosevelt's, amongst others, was carrot and stick. I use more stick than carrot. Okay. When you use too much carrot, again, you want to be liked. Or not necessarily you want to be liked by the other side. You want to have a general ambiance that you're a good guy or a good gal. And you almost always see ex-presidents, about the last year or two of their presidency, they start to repaint their legacy. Okay? That's what presidential libraries are all about. Repainting. Because as proven Plato or somebody said, the truth is who wrote the history, okay? And so we have a lot of presidents. I think all presidents have a presidential library, or at least in recent years. And so you subconsciously, don't want, whether it's to embarrass your family name. Most of the people in this room, you have no family name, so it doesn't make a shit. Okay, or embarrass yourself, or embarrass your children, or embarrass your spouse. You take actions based on when you first go to school, kindergarten, if that's where you started school. Stay out of trouble, keep your head down, don't make too much noise. Be invisible. That was impossible for me to be invisible. I still remember my mom walking me not to the school, because then all the kids would say, "Hey, you're a wuss pussy." But 2 blocks away, so she could see through the schoolyard as I entered the building. And I'm sure I mentioned it, that when Sally and I went back this year to my school, that I dropped the aquarium on the teacher, and the teacher, the current head of the school, was walking me around, and I said, "Sally, this is where I broke a kid's arm in 7 places. This is where I put a guy's eyes out. This is what." It was like, it was like old home week. And the school looks much smaller to me now, the play yard, because I was little. Okay. Who is, we need a volunteer. There's a lot of you that haven't done it yet, so we're going to get around to you, so you might as well, this is not like, you make it sound, or you make it appear like, and you've heard me say this, in the Battle of the Somme, the Germans and the Allies fought over roughly between 100 and 150 meters for years, okay? And they dug all these trenches, etc. And then they used to use, and you used to have to shave every day during World War I, unlike now. And they give you a shot of Dutch courage, whiskey or something, and everybody had a shot. And then some young kid, 19, 20, 21 years old, with his riding crop under his arm. He had a pistol. Okay, lads, doop, doop, over the top. One would be killed, one would be maimed, and one would get through. Okay, I would submit that the guys that thought they were going to get through probably got through. But if you thought, or there was even an inkling of doubt, that you were going to maim or dead, Allah provided you with the result, and you were maimed or dead. This is not that Maginot Line for the Battle of the Somme. So I want somebody to step up. Does everybody have their materials that they left before and they couldn't do last night? Natasha? Let's go to your crossbows.